Welcome back to the Deep Dives. Today, we're jumping right into some really fascinating source material, part of this ongoing series, actually. It's all about the engine of human interest. Yeah, our mission really is to unpack the conditions, like the bare minimum needed for someone to stop worrying about just practical stuff, job, money, the day-to-day, and start getting curious about things with, well, no practical payoff. Things that don't bring any profit.
That's the crucial bit, isn't it? The author in this dialogue really pins it down. We have to ignore the usual factors like innate talent or special schooling or, an upbringing that pushed learning. We're looking for that default human setting where you start wondering, what else is out there?
And the interlocutor in the dialogue, they immediately suggest two paths, two emotional states, feeling either very bad or very good.
And the dialogue really zeroes in on the very good state. The very bad situation. Well, sure, intense pressure can make you focus, but that's about survival, right? Not pure open-ended curiosity. So you're exploring the positive side of the conditions where curiosity just blooms.
Okay, so let's talk about that baseline, this state where life is good or I'm doing okay, as the source puts it. What does that actually involve? What are the components?
Well, the source is quite specific. It's about a kind of holistic stability. For someone to genuinely feel, I'm doing okay, their family life needs to be stable, their job secure, enough income.
Right.
They already have hobbies they enjoy, enough emotional connection with others. But the key summary is that feeling of, I don't worry about tomorrow. And that creates this surplus almost.
Yeah.
A bit of extra mental space opens up because you're not constantly firefighting immediate problems. This feeling of being satisfied, funnily enough, is what sets the stage for wanting something else.
That's the really interesting philosophical twist here, isn't it? We strive for that stable life where everything's sorted. But the author's point is that kind of stability, it's not built to last. Once you actually get to everything's fine, what's the next step? The dialogue puts it very simply. Nothing can stay fine for long. That very stability, that lack of worry, it turns into this internal nudge, like, okay, I want something more now.
Exactly. And if that something more doesn't find an immediate focus, if nothing obvious presents itself, that energy kind of pools and becomes boredom. But it's not presented as a negative thing here.
Right, not laziness.
No, not at all. It's framed as a necessary catalyst. Boredom is actually the engine, the force that kicks a person out of that comfortable spot and makes them look for new possibilities.
Okay, so boredom is the fuel. Now, where does that energy go? Where does this newly energized but bored person look first? The author asks very clearly. Do they look outside themselves or inside?
And the immediate, almost universal reaction, the default setting, it's outwards. You look to the external world, new experiences, new gadgets, travel, scrolling, something out there to fill the gap.
And that outward glance, that's where things get maybe inefficient. If we're thinking about developing deeper things like complex thought or a solid worldview or real understanding.
Right. Because all those complex things, thinking, understanding, your worldview, they're located inside. They're internal structures you have to build. Looking outward first is just easier. It's the path of least resistance. But it's not where you find the tools or the blueprints for that deep inner construction.
Which leads us right to the most common outward fix for boredom, entertainment. And this is where the source material gets really insightful, particularly with this linguistic dive into the Russian word razvolshenie.
Yes, the word itself is almost like a warning label if you look closely.
Yeah.
When we talk about seeking distraction or entertainment, we don't usually think about what the word means, razvolshenie.
Yeah.
It literally translates to something like scattering your attraction or spreading out your pull.
Yeah.
It comes from the root word in Russian for drive or interest or pull, combined with a prefix that means to spread apart, to break up, to diffuse. So entertainment, razvolshenie, is fundamentally anything that scatters your attention.
Wow. Okay. So it actively diffuses the very energy that boredom created. That focused potential just gets spread thin. It makes you relax, sure, but it pulls your focus away from anything deep or concentrated, like mindlessly flicking through channels or scrolling social media feeds.
Precisely. It fragments your attention. And that's exactly why it's the default. Real intellectual growth developing complex thinking that requires concentration, hard focus. Deconcentration, the scattering effect of entertainment, it just feels nicer, easier in the moment. It's immediate relief.
The interlocutor in the dialogue even says that, right? That the deconcentration feels better. But the author hits back with this really profound point we need to sit with. You only prefer it because you haven't really tasted the alternative. Or maybe you don't yet grasp the difference between pleasure and joy.
And that distinction is huge philosophically. It's a key point for you, the listener, to consider. Pleasure, in this context, seems to be that easy relief from scattering your focus, the quick fix of distraction. It's
Yeah.
surface level.
Yeah, temporary.
Right. Whereas joy is presented as something deeper. The intrinsic satisfaction that comes from building something meaningful inside yourself. And that building process, it demands that difficult concentration. So if you've never really experienced that deep satisfaction, that joy of truly grappling with a complex idea and making it your own, then naturally the easy out, the pleasure of external distraction, is always going to look more appealing. It's kind of a perfect trap.
Okay, so this leads to a really practical question then. If we need concentration to fight that pull towards scattering our attention, what about reading? Does picking up a book, especially a challenging one, count as the kind of concentration we need for inner growth?
The short answer is yes. Reading definitely requires and counts as concentration of attention. But, and this is a really important but, from the source material, reading alone doesn't automatically mean you're developing your thinking.
Ah, okay, so it's not just about absorbing the words. That's the potential trap for learners, isn't it? You could read all the great books. The author apparently mentioned Brodsky's list in a previous discussion, but if you're just passively taking it in.
Exactly. If you're just letting the information wash over you without actively engaging, processing, connecting it,
Here.
you might still be in a state closer to relaxation, to deconcentration, than to actual cognitive construction. You're just collecting information, not necessarily building understanding.
It's like a difference between just having a pile of bricks versus actually mixing mortar and building a wall.
That's a great analogy. The sources really emphasize that the effort, the focus, isn't just about opening the book. It's about actively engaging your mind, connecting ideas, questioning them, testing them against what you already know. That's where the real development happens.
Okay, let's try and wrap this up a bit, bring it together for you listening. We started with this idea that having your basic needs met, feeling okay, paradoxically creates the energy, this boredom, that pushes you to seek something more. But the default path is often outward, towards entertainment razzle Shaney, which scatters that energy, pulling us away from the deeper inner work of concentration and building understanding. Even reading, while requiring focus, needs active engagement to be truly constructive.
And this whole discussion, it's part of a larger ongoing exploration in the source material. So if this is your first time joining us, we really do recommend checking out the previous deep dives on the channel or podcast platform. It helps to see how these ideas connect and build over time.
Definitely worth it to get the full picture.
And true to the style of this series, the author doesn't just leave it there. They end this particular dialogue with another provocative thought experiment, a kind of riddle for the interlocutor, and by extension, for you. It perfectly sums up this idea of building versus just collecting. It relates directly to building those internal mental structures. Here's the riddle, exactly as cited. You know the Leaning Tower of Pisa. Then think about this. If the builders had gathered stones of random shapes and sizes and simply piled them up without any mortar, could they have built a tall tower?
That's a powerful image, isn't it? Think about it. All the facts we gather, the books we read, the ideas we encounter, those are the stones. If we just pile them up, passively absorb them through scattered attention, or even just basic reading without deeper thought.
They won't form a stable structure. They can't stand tall on their own. The Leaning Tower itself is famous precisely because its foundation and structure are flawed.
Right. So the mortar, that's the crucial element. The mortar is the effort, the concentration, the active thinking, the synthesis that connects all those different pieces of knowledge into something coherent, something stable that can actually support further growth. That's the work required to escape that scattering effect of Resl-Shaney.
It leaves you with a pretty direct question, doesn't it? What acts as the mortar in your own thinking? Are you just collecting stones, or are you actively mixing the mortar and building something solid inside?
A really great point to ponder. Think about your mortar.
Yeah.
We hope you'll join us again for our next deep dive, whether you're watching the video or listening to the podcast feed. And as always, don't be too serious.